How does someone go from being incredibly devout to being incredibly violent? It's a tough question. Today, we're going to try to answer it by diving into the story of the Kharijites, who were basically Islam's first extremist sect. We're going to see how a group of the most pious worshippers could become, well, history's most notorious heretics.
All right, so let's set the scene. Picture this. It's the year 657. The early Muslim empire is tearing itself apart in a brutal civil war. The caliph, Ali ibn Abi Talib, is right there on the battlefield. And in the heat of the moment, he's about to make a decision that will literally fracture his army and give birth to a brand new, terrifying way of thinking.
And this was their slogan. Right after the Caliph Ali agreed to a truce to stop the fighting, 12,000 of his own men just broke away. They packed up, made their own camp, and started chanting this phrase over and over again. Judgment belongs only to Allah. In their minds, a sacred decision was just placed in the hands of mortal men, and they just would not stand for it. And get this, we have a fascinating description of these guys. When the great scholar Ibn Abbas went out to meet them, he found people whose devotion was just on another level. I mean, their foreheads were literally scarred from praying so much. Their hands were callous like a camel's knees from leaning on them in prayer. These were not lazy, ignorant people. These guys were the most hardcore worshippers around.
So that brings us to the big question, right? This is the heart of the mystery we're trying to solve. How did this group, a group literally defined by their intense piety, become the first sect to declare other Muslims disbelievers and say it was okay to kill them? It's a chilling puzzle, and we're about to put the pieces together. So to really get inside their heads, we need to understand two really core ideas in early Islamic thought. These two concepts were at the absolute center of this whole conflict. It all comes down to sticking to the path or dangerously straying from it.
Okay, so on the one hand, you have the Sunnah. This literally means the path. It's the established, well-trodden way of the Prophet Muhammad and his closest companions. For the early Muslims, this was the safe road. But on the other hand, you have bid'ah, or innovation. This is any new thing added to the religion, and they were extremely cautious about this. They saw it as a dangerous deviation, something that could lead you completely astray. And this quote from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, one of the Prophet's most knowledgeable companions, just nails that mindset. The idea was that the religion was already perfect and complete. So if you tried to add something or change something, even if you had good intentions, you were taking a dangerous step off that path. And the Kharijites, they believed they were the only true defenders of that sacred path. All right, so with that idea in our back pocket, let's jump back to the battlefield in 657, because this political mess was the spark that lit the fuse of their religious extremism. So Ali's in charge, but his authority is being challenged by Muawiyah, the governor of Syria. Their armies clash at the Battle of Siffin. To stop the bloodshed, Muawiyah's soldiers do something clever. They raise pages from the Quran on the tips of their spears and call for the whole thing to be decided by human judges. Ali agrees, wanting to end the war, but for the men who would become the Kharijites, this was the ultimate sin. A divine matter was being handed over to the flawed judgment of men. That was the breaking point. Now, in a last-ditch effort to bring them back, the Caliph Ali sends his cousin, the brilliant scholar Ibn Abbas, to go talk to them. He doesn't send an army, he sends a debater. He wanted to understand their arguments and refute them, using the very scriptures they claimed to be upholding. So Ibn Abbas shows up, and the Kharijites, they've got their arguments ready. They lay out their entire case against Ali, and it all boils down to three main grievances. Three sins that, in their eyes, made him an illegitimate ruler and made their rebellion totally justified. Okay, point number one. This was their big one, their main theological argument. By agreeing to have human judges, they said Ali had committed a massive sin. He had taken a right that belongs only to God, the right to judge, and he gave it to men. This is the argument behind their slogan, judgment belongs only to Allah. But Ibn Abbas's reply was just brilliant. He basically asked them, look, what's more important? A man's judgment to stop Muslims from killing each other, or his judgment over a rabbit? Then he quoted verses from the Quran where God himself tells people to use human judges for things like marital disputes or figuring out the penalty for hunting game illegally. His point was undeniable. If God allows human judges for small things, of course it's allowed for the much, much bigger deal of saving human lives. Their second point was about how Ali conducted the war. See, normally in a war against non-Muslims, you would take prisoners and spoils. So the Kharijites asked, if you were so right and they were so wrong,
Why didn't you treat them like a conquered enemy?
And here, Ibn Abbas just sets this perfect rhetorical trap. He points out that in an earlier battle, the Prophet's own wife, Aisha, was with the opposing army. So he asks them, would you dare take your mother, who the Quran calls the mother of the believers, and make her your slave? And they were just cornered. If they say yes, it's total blasphemy. If they say no, they admit that this is a war between Muslims, not a war against infidels, and so the normal rules of war just don't apply. Checkmate. All right, their final point was all about a title. During the peace talks, Ali's opponents refused to call him leader of the believers in the treaty. To get the deal done, Ali just agreed to use his name, Ali ibn Abi Talib. The Kharijites saw this as a huge sign of weakness, like he was admitting he wasn't the real leader. And once again, Ibn Abbas comes back with this killer historical example. He reminds them about the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The Prophet Muhammad was negotiating with his enemies in Mecca, and they refused to accept his title, Messenger of Allah. So to make peace happen, the Prophet himself erased the title from the document. Ali wasn't being weak, he was literally following the Prophet's playbook, the Sunnah. So what happened after this debate? Well, it had a huge impact. Faced with clear, undeniable evidence from their own sources, 2,000 of the rebels realized they were wrong. They repented and came back to Ali's army. But the others weren't convinced. They just dug their heels in even deeper. And this, right here, is where the story takes its darkest turn. With the more moderate voices now gone, the Kharijites that remain went from pious protest to shocking, brutal violence against anyone who disagreed with them. This led to a really terrifying paradox. On their journey, they captured a random civilian. They basically interrogated him about his faith, and when he didn't give the right answers, they murdered him and his pregnant wife. It's horrific. Yet, in the very same camp, when one of their own guys picked up a single date that had fallen from a non-Muslim's tree, his friends told him he couldn't eat it without paying for it, and he immediately spat it out. Just think about that. They were obsessed about the sin of a single piece of fruit, but saw no problem with murdering innocent people. When Ali heard about this atrocity, he demanded they hand over the killers. And their response? It's just chilling. They replied, "We all killed them." They proudly took collective responsibility. To them, it wasn't a crime, it was a righteous act. And that was the final straw. Ali's army confronted them and defeated them decisively at the Battle of Nahrawan. But even though their army was crushed, you can't always kill an idea that easily. Their ideology survived, burning away in the hearts of the fanatics who managed to escape. And the tragic results of their extremism would be felt for years. Sure enough, 4 years later, one of those survivors, a man named Abdurrahman ibn Muljam, fueled by pure revenge, assassinated the Caliph Ali while he was leading the morning prayer in the mosque. The very man they first rebelled against for being, in their eyes, too soft, became the ultimate victim of their hardened hate. What's really haunting about all of this is that the Prophet Muhammad himself seems to have warned that a group like this would appear. He prophesied that a people would come who would be amazing in their worship, always reciting the Quran, but it would all be on the surface. He said the faith would not go past their throats. They'd have such a shallow understanding that they would exit the religion as fast as an arrow flies through its target. It's an eerily perfect description of the Kharijites. So, in the end, we're left with this question. The story of the Kharijites is a 1,400-year-old warning. It's about how sincerity, when it gets mixed with ignorance and arrogance, can become the perfect fuel for the worst kinds of acts. It really forces us to ask ourselves, where is that fine, blurry line between a deep, profound faith and a dangerous fanaticism that just makes you deaf to reason and blind to simple human compassion?